Morena tātou, nā tēnei mea tōna kia tātou koroe ka mai nei. Mā koe whakatuwhera tēnei wahanga kia tātou me te tai karakia, tātana te karakia. Hā tāta, hā wara tāta, ka poro ki te manu, ka warori te kutu, ko tāta nui ka horaina, ka tai ki te umere, he pō, he ao, ka Aotearoa, tihei, Maori ora. Bearing in mind that we'll be doing a lot of talking, I'll throw back to Penny for now, and then we'll introduce ourselves soon. So, kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Delane. Thank you so much for opening for us. Morena, e te whānau. Lovely to see you on this beautiful Friday morning. We're about to walk together into the second part of this first module, and just really excited to have Tokona te Raki joining us and sharing their whakaaro this morning. I just really invite everyone. I know it's every week's a long week. Friday morning is a moment of joy that we've made it here, and just to let the kōrero flow over, take the things that are useful and helpful, and the rest will just kind of sit there and become meaningful as it does. So my invitation is not to worry about trying to capture everything. Just let it be there and sit there, and we can return to stuff as it becomes meaningful to you. So I'm just going to pull up some slides and just do a little bit of like landing us in today, and then I'll be handing over to our whānau no Tatahi. And just as a little bit of a recap of what we went through yesterday, was a really full session, and so I'm just going to step through a little bit of what we started to process yesterday, and then land us into today. So we did, along with the welcome, and the first time start thinking about the kind of foundations and the backdrop to the mahi and to the conversations around equity and intergenerational wellbeing. And we talked about this model that helps us to think about locating ourselves in the broader picture and systems, and how we might be working in place with people, but it's really significant and important that we hold our gaze to the wider structural factors that actually influence well-being. And so that idea of designing for equity and intergenerational well-being means working with people, but also with all the wider structural factors and influences and history and stories and energies that sit around that and influence, and that our actions and ways of working can contribute to rebalancing and promoting well-being, or actually we can be inadvertently pushing things back and reinforcing patterns that are really unhelpful and unhealthy. So we just kind of landed ourselves into some of that context and the potential to think about our actions in that way. We started to think about, that's a massive set of things to be considering in everyday practice, all the different things that have happened and past, present and future. How do we anchor ourselves in some ways into a practice that it doesn't paralyze us, but actually allows us to take action, but to be mindful and think about how are we being really intentional where we can each day in thinking about those things. And so there was 7 things that we have found for our practice have been really helpful to be mindful of, to tune into. And we particularly heard about the approach when we talked to He whānau whānui o Papakura, that was really talking into that culturally grounded, values-led and strength-based practice. And we're going to hear more of that today, and Tokona te Raki will tell us about their practices, and we'll see more ways that that's living and lived across.
And what you see on the screen is the beautiful picture from yesterday, and the team who were talking about the work that they did at Papakura, where they had 14 agencies and 12 whānau. And the co-design sprint, talking about their tikanga-based innovation processes, and what the question being asked about what do agencies need to consider to support this whānau-led innovation.
Awesome job, Lee. Do you want me to jump in, or you're going good?
Yeah, no, you can.
Kia ora. We've got technology fun this morning. Cool. And so these are just picking out some of the questions and themes that came out from yesterday in the different conversations. And some of these we'll have an opportunity to dive into more. Some of them we might be able to pick up as we go on over the year. not just in these weeks, but the capacity for influence and potential, to increase and compound, but also to be mindful of actually a bunch of different things that we can do. So someone had picked up, for example, language as being a powerful way of thinking about what are we modeling, and how are we thinking about the power of language. Ways to share and shift power was really strong in people's reflections, and the benefit of the process of actually working together and what that produces, rather than just focusing on the output or the outcome. It's actually the way we work together that starts to create the shift and the change. And in fact, what we were really hearing about yesterday was the potential of the process to be, and the way we work together to be, a healing practice, which has its own kind of flow on and ripple effects. We also, people have been posing questions, and so things like, how do we meet the challenge of, designing with what's important for whānau and alongside outcomes the organisation has to achieve. And I think naming those kind of tensions are really interesting things that we'll try and unpack as we go. Tokona te Raki may have some observations about that. How to work in a strengths-based way when deficit is the norm. So there was an observation about how often we use deficit language, and it's in relation to things like funding, and so how much those things can hold us in the status quo. So naming of these things really important. And then what happens when values don't align. So again, we may be able to surface some of that today, but these are some of the themes and questions we're seeing come through that we'll do our best to weave in and address. And next slide. So just today, we're just going to do a little bit of a check-in of how everybody's going and what sort of surfaced overnight, and then listen alongside Tokona te Raki about their work, which they'll cover lots of amazing terrain, but in particular values-led mahi, treaty-led mahi, and learning-led mahi. So it helps us explore further some of the things we've touched on, and sets us up for some conversations we're going to have in the weeks to come, particularly around learning and around how we build capability and capacity through the process. And so one of the things that's just important to name is that this is not really about throwing a bunch of information at you. It's about us collectively getting an understanding and being able to connect in and grow our awareness of the strong practice that's already happening in Aotearoa, the practice that's local to us, and making that visible and making those connections. And so this is a group who are also working with complex issues with an intergenerational lens. So there's a lot to learn from there. Before we do hand over to them though, really keen for us to just check in as a group around how we're going. Yesterday we used this Pātai, how was your waka today? So just wanting to see fresh morning, hopefully at least some sleep, and just see how everyone's feeling this morning. So jump into the Slido link that will be in the chat now, and just let us know how your waka is traveling today. So I'm just going to bring up some of the responses that are coming through. It sounds like it's pretty cold in Wellington. Looks like it's pretty cold. People are traveling slowly but steady, full and slow, ambitious, excited, anchored, tuatau, inspired but glad that it's Friday. Great, excited, smooth, motivated, positive, slowly, slow and steady, hopefully, slow and steady. So some really beautiful words coming through in there, and just really nice for us to just check in with where people are at and be able to name those things and then work from that point. So if you haven't done that, drop a term in, but we'd also like to ask you one more question. So there's going to be another link coming in to the Slido chat just now. And that's around the question that you're sitting with that may have emerged out of yesterday's conversation. So there's a second link there if you click on that. And the question is, what's a question you're sitting with from yesterday? It might be the same question that you had at the end of yesterday, or it might not, because a lot goes on when you're asleep in your brain processing. So just share with us what's pātai you're sitting with from yesterday. We'll just leave a couple of minutes for those to come up. Some good challenging questions here. So are our leaders on the same waka? How to do this for whānau in an organisation? That's all about being fast-paced and agile. How to use language around capacity building. How to bring this kōrero and whakaaro to the rest of the organisation. Will definitely, I think somehow we're sharing someone else's screen. how to not get overwhelmed by the complexity of the systems organizations we work with. Some really great questions here. So we'll have a look at these as they're coming up and just see how we can weave them in, but also the connections across them, because some of you are going to be sitting with really similar questions and we can help each other out in terms of what we've learned, what we're trying and what we're doing across these spaces. So just before I switch back to our awesome guests that we have today, I just wanted to share that there's a really lovely shift between, these were the emotions from yesterday. So there's a shift between the where people were at yesterday. There was a lot of more kind of unsettled or tired, and then this morning we had feeling energized. So that's a really awesome thing to see. And also just wanting to acknowledge that naming emotions, there's a whole science behind it that's really powerful to how we can make kind of empowered personal decisions about where we're at and how we work together. We can share a little bit of that if people are interested. So this is practice of noticing, naming. It's not judging, it's just observing and being able to build our language around where we're at and how we're feeling is a really significant part of being able to navigate, if you like, in complexity. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to swap over shortly to the Tokona Te Raki slides in a second. But so I just want to say a huge welcome to our friends in Otatahi. Thank you so much for joining us. It's just such a privilege to have you share your whakaaro and your journey with us. And apologies, for the little drop out there. And I'm just going to hand it over to you now and hopefully just quietly drive the slides for you in the background as we can. And so ngā mihi nui kia koutou, welcome, and I'll hand it over to you.
Tēnā no tātou, nai tēnei mihi atu ana, no mātou te whiwhi, no mātou te honore, kia tau mai, mā runga Zoom ki wānganui i a tātou. Ei tēnei ata, nei tēnei tū he waha kōrero, ke whakamarama mai, ko ai tātou, Aotearoa, ko ai Tokona Te Raki. Morning everyone. I just want to say how fortunate and excited we are to join you this morning. And I think I speak for all of us to be a part of such an awesome module and kind of share our story today. But firstly, morena tātou, ko ai tēnei, ko te lei mau tōku ringoa, he uri tēnei no ngā iwi o Ngāti Rārua, Ngaitahu Ngāti Manipoto me Te Rārua hoki, he kairanga hau rangatahi, hau kei Tokona Te Raki. So I'm a rangatahi researcher here at Tokona Te Raki, who I'm fortunate enough to look at whānau voice, but super excited to join you all this morning. I'll let these two introduce themselves too before kicking off. Kia ora.
Kia ora te whānau, ko Madison Simons tōku ingoa, he rea hau no Ngaitahu Ngāti Whātua Te Rua me Ngāti Kahumanu, he kaiarahi awaha mō Tokona Te Raki. Kia ora, I am Maddie. This is my second time on here, so thank you for having me back. I obviously didn't do a terrible job last time, so thank you for the second invite. But I am the Rangatahi Labs Director for Tokona Te Raki, and I'm holding Portia's baby, Leonidas. So just morena, thank you for having us.
Kia ora koutou, ko Portia tuka ingoa, Ngāti Pākehā te iwi. I am just actually in my first week back from maternity leave, so hence we have Pepe in the room. Hopefully he shouldn't be too noisy, but we'll just roll with this very organic process at the moment. Looking forward to sharing the kōrero, and please don't feel shy to, if there's any pārtai or questions, either use the chat or let us know, because we're more than happy to jam with you on this. Cool.
But to start, I think it is important to understand where we as a Tokona Te Raki adopted our name from, and it originates from Ngātahu creation story, which begins with the various phases of Te Pō, which is the night, Te Ao, the day, and Te Kore, the void, and Te Kore, from Te Kore comes Te Māku, which is the dampness, and changes into Mahora Nui Aotea, the expanse, who gives birth to Raki, the Sky Father, who in our creation story has several wives before Papa Tuanaku, our Earth Mother. And in the story, Raki had been injured battling Tangaroa, or Takarua as we refer to him, the god of the ocean, who was the first husband of Papa Tuanaku. and was clinging closely to her, which meant that the world was dark and confining space. Raki knew change was needed and asked his sons to kill him, so the heavens could be raised and the human race could live and have a life. In his words, he said, "If I die, then the world will gain light and brightness." Tane, his son, then began chanting a karakia. Once he finished, the world became bright and full of potential. Te runa o Ngāi Tahu and Tokona Te Raki draws inspiration from this tradition in the whakatauki. Tokona Te Raki kia tū, Tokona Te Raki kia ora, likening the act of raising the heavens to the work of whānau transformation. Like the toko of Tane and Paia, the challenge is to raise the ceiling of possibility and creating the conditions of new light and potential to emerge. A key part of what we have learned is the idea of rangi tukutuku, which is everything is stuck and things are bound together like a tukutuku panel. So part of the challenge is how do we unlearn and unweave all these bindings that are holding everything in place, in order for there to be wiggle room to be loose enough to raise the ceilings of rangi once again. That is going to be a real key part of not thinking of rangatahi coming in and learning of our old ways, but how we can learn from them and how they support us to unlearn these behaviours, practices, and the way we have been doing things. Let's not forget that this is what causes inequity. These things that haven't been working for our people, how do we create that space for new ideas to emerge, new ways, new patterns, and behaviours? This is where our name of Tokona Te Raki comes from, the po that holds up the heavens. Go to the next slide, please, Penny. All this comes from Matiaha Tira Morihu.
It'll come, yeah.
Kapai. Our refugee from Hāpoi who moved down to Moiraki in 1848 was talking about equity. May the brown skin be equal to that of the white skin. This is a dream that has still not been achieved. It is something that is still elusive. Equity for our people, we have still not achieved that. So when we think of Matiaha as a visionary, as a futurist, he existed in a time when Ngāi Tahu was absolutely at its poorest. His wife belittled him for eating a second potato at dinner because they were that hungry, they were that poor. And at a time when we were really at destitute, that he had a bold intergenerational vision, and that was te kreme or the claim. We know that story took us 7 generations to achieve that vision, but we also know that Matiaha was never alive to actually see or experience the fruition of that vision. This kaupapa we are living in is a legacy of Matiaha, but how do we think like Matiaha, but also mihi to that mahi as we move now into turning that into a day job? If we have any hope of our rangatahi realising their vision while they are still alive and not waiting 7 generations. As some of the big kaupapa on the horizons, we may even hear in 7 generations, we may not even be here in 7 generations if we don't start getting onto these things now. A key part, again, is to reiterate, it is to unlearning the ways we have been doing things, where we don't trust ourselves as Maori, we don't trust our whakapapa or mātauranga, and we have this pattern where we keep relying on new and important Western solutions to fix broken Western systems that are not working for us or our people. If you go to the next slide, please, Penny. So really, a part of the mahi is building a kawa for innovation. It is about drawing down on our tupuna wisdom and using that wisdom to help navigate our way through complexity and challenges moving forward, so that we are both honouring the past, creating the future, and radically traditional, and how we are moving forward into the future. And again, our people are doers. As in a iwi, we are fishermen, healers, but it's not also all about the conceptual stuff. It is about saying for our generations that things are not working for us, and we have gotten to the stage of how we train an army of people that can make solutions for our own cultural worldview. It is not enough to be talking and tearing those things down, but starting to think about how we do equip our own people with the skills, knowledge, and discipline, and create a platform for them to build mana motuhake solutions and turning mana motuhake into their professions and into their day jobs. If you go to the next slide, please. At our team, we are fortunate enough to have our own kawa and practice in which we have introduced to inform and support our mahi. This kawa has been given the name of Te Kore Korenga and has strong links to both Matiha Tira Morihu and the creation story I've just shared. Te Kore Korenga is a tool for Maori future making, which has been crafted from the learnings of our tupuna and seeks to give us a confidence in our own cultural knowledge to help us navigate towards a new future. The kawa is drawn from a karakia known as Kaia Te Pō, written by Matiaha, and refers to the three realms of Te Kore, Te Pō, and Te Ao. And moving through our kawa, we realised that there were four realms: Te Aotearoa, which is the current state, and the world of light. And for us, this means knowing, doing, and reviewing, which is things like earning an income, getting things right, and that day-to-day grind we often find ourselves in. Chronologically would be now. The next phase is Te Kore, or nothingness, and this is where we associate the world of potential. It is seeking, reflecting, and understanding. The experience of Te Kore happens when whatever the normal situation gets interrupted and something unusual happens or becomes possible. In chronological terms, the past. When we move into Te Ao, Te Pō, the world of darkness, for most of us, the night is time for sleeping and dreaming. This is why we associate imagining, designing, and making to this part or this realm. During this important regenerative time, when many important processes are taking place in our bodies and throughout the natural world, which we cannot see, often unaware of, this chronologically is the future. And the final realm is now known as Te Ao Marama, which is the possible future. This is where everything we have foreseen in the past states is now realized, where we must action those thoughts and ideas to create a future we have imagined in Te Pō, where we are able to learn from those thoughts of Te Kore and create our own and new Te Ao Marama. Our kawa can be applied in many different scenarios. It is something we continue to adapt and add to, as it was only Tuesday we held a full-day workshop with Che Wilson and Chris Marangipuna on Te Kore Korenga. We have applied it in two ways, through a circular approach which allows us and participants to associate in a conceptual or kawaurunga lens. And the second is a linear approach which allows for a more practical or kawairaro lens to be applied. In terms of an example and real use of our kawa, we have blocked out Friday mornings as reflective sessions where we run through Te Kore Korenga as a team. We use this time to either reflect on personal or project pieces. We spend 5 minutes in each realm. For example, as we begin, we choose an interaction or event that happened in the previous week, then step into Te Kore, the place of seeking, reflecting, and understanding. This realm allows us to ponder and think about significant connections that led or followed onto events. We then step into Te Pō, the space of imagining, designing, and making. This state allows us to focus on the next steps and plan as we move into Te Ao Marama, which, as mentioned, is a future realised through actioning the points and plans throughout the process. As a team, we have found these sessions extremely valuable and something we as an organisation are grateful to use, as not many have time blocked out specifically for reflection or to be able to use a kawa of their own. As we apply Te Kore Korenga through this process, it allows us to look at a larger picture and name both pain and gain points that may be in our current work, while also providing a foundation and platform to both identify it early, but also put things into place to minimise further risk or, in return, maximise gain. So when we look at our kawa, we are fortunate enough to use it in that sense, but also apply it across all projects in our mahi, which we have found to be extremely resourceful, and as we said, it continues to adapt and use it further. So I guess that kind of leads on to our question and also what you will be discussing in the breakout room. So if you go through to the next slide, please, Penny. Our pātai to you is, does your team or organisation have values, and if so, how are these infused into your everyday practice? How may this be improved or enhanced? Do any of you have anything you want to add?
I guess the only thing from me, sorry if you can still see me, is that our kawa, so lots of people obviously within organisations have values or tikanga. Our kawa is inclusive of our values. So we set a kawa that really just means, you know, how do we work together? How do we look after each other in these unknown spaces? And so it's a kawa is inclusive of our values, and it's really just about actually how do we uphold our mana in our everyday mahi. And we recognise that by having te kore korenga, which as Elaine said is one, there's a practical process and there's a conceptual process, is that people learn differently. People really learn differently in terms of moving into projects, and there's areas they're more comfortable in. And so that's why te kore korenga is like a live process and a live kawa, because we know that as new people come into our team, we develop, we use new projects, we get new contracts, is that we have to keep developing our kawa along with us, and we have to keep recognising the new levels of opportunity that it could give us. But we only know that it has opportunity because we use it every day. If we don't continuously use our values every day, we don't know the value they can offer us in our mahi, and we don't know how we can develop it. Be my main thing.
Yeah, and the only extra thing that was also Maddie, is that for us we've really made a shift from having, like all organisations do, have these beautiful values and articulated practices on the wall that nobody ever really uses, and so it became a very intentional shift that we made a couple of years ago to actually walk in our talk. So it's something that we've spent quite a bit of time talking about this morning, because we really see it as the pūmanawatanga, or the heartbeat of our organisation, that it holds us all together while we're all really busy and go out there on our different mahi, our different projects and things. That coming together on a Friday is an opportunity for us to take stock, breathe, share our learning, and also check in with each other. But the kawa as an everyday practice is the way that we conduct ourselves in our mahi with our partners, with our whānau, with each other. And like Maddie said, that's something that continues to grow. It's a living kawa, so it's not something that is set in stone. It's
I guess the only other thing would be if anyone needs any clarification before going away and having a kōrero about this pātai, is that if anyone had any translations for any of our kupu that they needed, or if they just wanted us to explain that question a little bit more, if anyone had any pātai, otherwise, happy to go into the breakout rooms.
Awesome. Kia ora. I think, if people have got some clarification questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we can just follow those and make sure that people know what they need. But you guys have just done a really beautiful opening kōrero for us. Thank you so much. There was a lot shared there, and I know that we can come back and access some of those things in different ways, but some really lovely words around unlearning and upholding mana in your everyday practice, the action, also just the honesty of the time it takes from going from having the principles to living the principles, and the work that's involved in that. So lots of really helpful, beautiful reflections. Thank you. I'll just hand over to Baruch to drop people into a breakout. You'll probably have a new configuration today. Some people you'll know, some people you may not. So take the time to introduce yourselves and then explore this pātai and some reflections from this kōrero with some others in the group, and we'll see you back here in 10 or 15 minutes. Kia ora. Okay. So as people are coming back in, if you want to drop in any reflections from the conversation you had prior to the break, or any pātai for Tokona Te Raki, please just drop them in the chat, and I'll sort of just scoop them up and feed them in if there's time and it's possible as we go. So just to those returning, if you have got any reflections that you'd like to share from the kōrero you had before the break, or any pātai that we can try and weave in with Tokona Te Raki, please just drop them in the chat, and we'll just keep an eye on that. So feel free also, as Maddie is talking, to add questions in, and we'll just do our best to weave them in if we can. So drop them in the chat along with any reflections from your kōrero before about values. So are you happy to, if I pass the rako to you, Maddie, do you want me to pull the slides up?
Cool. So morena, like I said earlier, I am Maddie, the Rangatahi Labs Director for Tokona Te Raki, and I am rolling through our Maori Futures Academy, a kaupapa we have just launched and hopefully you have all seen a little bit about. And then looking at how that is an example of our team having a treaty partnership, the complexities around that relationship, and just some of the learnings we have gained from that kaupapa. So firstly, the Māori Futures Academy. Are the slides up, sorry?
No, but I can do that now.
Cool. Thank you, Penny. And just a wee thing, you guys will notice most of our slides are pictures. So it's really important for our team to be able to visually present our mahi. Mostly because one is Te Reo Māori was not traditionally a written language all of the time, as it was a spoken. And also images just mean that people can have kind of their own relationship to those and own meaning behind them. So that's just kind of a bit of background of those images. But if we just go to the next one. Cool. So the Māori Futures Academy. So kind of a little bit of background of that is Māori and Ngāi Tahu whānui come from a long line of change makers, a long line of innovators. It is in our whakapapa to disagree and to challenge and want more and want better. You know, if we look at Ngāi Tahu as an example, we were bold and fierce and uncompromising in a lot of the actions we took as a iwi. As Māori, we, you know, travelled and navigated all our way to Aotearoa, to New Zealand, and there were complexities around that, and yet we did it. And now, you know, Māori have chosen to settle here as the Indigenous peoples of New Zealand, and that was innovation, and that was challenging the norm. And we look at Te Runanga o Ngāi Tahu, or Ngāi Tahu as an iwi, and our settlement, our negotiators during our settlement were not much older than Delane and myself and other rangatahi. They were young when they did that. And they came together and united for a cause, and ultimately, in the most mana enhancing way possible, we are now a $1 billion organisation that can support over 60,000 whānau members. And so although we may not have dreamt of that when we were doing the settlement, we dreamt of change. And so change and wanting more and being a future maker is in our whakapapa and our DNA as Ngāi Tahu and as Māori. And so this image is really kind of showing the idea of the Māori Futures Academy, and that is that we can support rangatahi Māori to navigate complex spaces and ambiguity to really create change. And it's in the picture with the stars, it says guided by Mātauranga Māori. So it's like Delane said, it's trusting in ourselves and trusting in our own whakapapa and our own mātauranga to actually go, we don't need to adopt Western frameworks, we don't need to adopt Western solutions, we have them ourselves. And I think, I'm sure we all keep up with Rawiri Waititi in the house, and he is leading by example of going, actually, he's completely right. If there's solutions for Māori, they should be created by Māori. And so that is the idea of being guided by Mātauranga Māori, is that we just need to reconfirm with our people that we can trust ourselves. And the idea that it is rangatahi-led is similarly to what Delane said about those tuku panels, is that rangatahi Māori, we don't need to unteach them much. They're still in their prime of challenging and wanting better and wanting more. We always make a little bit of a joke that, you know, rangatahi, we haven't been beaten down by the world yet. We haven't had all those challenges of being an adult, and so we're still very aspirational in our thinking, and we don't need to unteach them anything, so they're the perfect rōpū to be bringing in. And so the Māori Futures Academy supports the development of a skilled, productive and resilient Māori workforce. Ultimately, the Academy looks to bring together a rōpū of rangatahi Māori to learn, immerse themselves, learn by doing, testing and trialling in our mahi and tools to understand how to navigate those complex issues. Learning by doing, rangatahi-led, grounded in our mātauranga, and proving that we can find our own solutions. So that's just a little bit of a background of the Academy. If we jump to the next one. So we recognise that there are multiple issues and problems that face our people. And recently we've kind of looked at, we understand that Māori is in a minority, but actually there's also other minority groups that we can bring along, and that kaupapa, Pacifica, LGBT, the rainbow community, for examples. And we're looking about what equity kind of means for all. But traditionally Māori, and we know we face a lot of issues. There's climate change, housing crisis, racist education systems, mental health. There's so many issues and problems facing our people now, is that we don't have the privilege to focus on one. And so I guess it's the question of why would we only have 2 or 3 people or 2 or 3 organisations looking at this if there's more than one problem? Why would we not try and encourage more people to move into the space to be change makers and future makers themselves? So that is what I guess the Academy looks at, is creating an army of future makers, supporting rangatahi Māori to feel confident in navigating complex spaces and ambiguity, having the tools and mātauranga to know how to do that. And so quite often when I talk about the Academy, I compare it to Ko Tahi Mano Kaika, which is our Te Reo Māori revitalisation program with Ngaitahu, is that they actively made the decision to create a whole generation of Te Reo Māori speakers. So there was a rōpū of Pākeke who decided to bring their rangatahi and their babies up speaking Te Reo only as their first language. And so they saw that as a way to save our Te Reo. I like to think that we're doing something very similar, is that if we could create a whole generation of people who innately think, actually, what's the root cause of this? What's the big lever we need to pull? They can recognise it, but they also have the tools and mātauranga to know how to actually start implementing some stuff, testing some stuff. We can change the future. We can save the future. We can move the future. We can redesign the future, because we have an entire generation who knows how to do it. And so obviously we're in the very small steps of trying to do that at the moment. But that is one of the big overarching ideas, is that if we have so many young people who just do this, it's not going to be complex anymore. It's not going to be difficult anymore. It's going to be our norm. It's going to be that rangatahi Māori nationwide are comfortable in unknown spaces, are comfortable in ambiguity, and are the best problem solvers in New Zealand. So on the 30th of April, we launched our first year of the Māori Futures Academy, and on May the 3rd, we had 10 rangatahi Māori starting in our academy. So today is the last day of their second week. It has been a little bit full on for them. We've been at an expo, a careers expo the last 2 days. They've been immersed in a whole lot of mahi for the last 2 weeks. But they're doing absolutely amazing. I am their age, and I kind of just thought, oh man, what have I been doing? These rangatahi are amazing. They're so clued on, they're challenging me, they're amazing, they're fantastic. And I guess the other thing with the Academy is that it's been done by rangatahi for Māori, for rangatahi. So I have to acknowledge Edu and the rest of our team, and even the team members that came far before the ones that are now, because the Academy has been an idea and a whakaaro for many years now, probably 5+ years. But the work process, the recruitment process, the content, the work plan, that has all been designed by myself, Delane, and our other 2 permanent rangatahi, Hine Pounamu and Hine Rangi. So we now have 13 rangatahi in our team. We officially outnumber the Pakeke. So we've got a little bit more power now, I like to think, a little bit more decision-making power. But I think that's a really important element of it, is that the rangatahi we bring in, they trust us now. They see us as a reflection of themselves, and so they feel safe, they feel invited, but they also have a level of respect for us because of the spaces we've been working in for so long. And so I think the by rangatahi for rangatahi has been a really important element of the Academy so far. If we just jump to probably the next slide. Awesome. So what we know to be really important within social innovation in general, and what we have recognised the importance within our Academy, is our lab space. And we're really lucky. At the beginning of last year, we moved back into our iwi's office, Te Whare o Te Wai Pounamu, and we have a beautiful space here, which is already amazing now, and we're also getting it refitted within the next few months, so it'll be even better. But the importance and significance of this space is that it's a space that offers rangatahi an environment where they're encouraged to be creative, they're encouraged to test and fail and try and just give things a go. And I think that was a really big selling pitch for our recruitment process and our rangatahi, was to go, this isn't offered in many spaces, a space for you to be able to come in and actually not be right, not have the pressure of all of these external, reporting and all that kind of stuff. We have Pakeke that do that, and our space as a safe space to be creative and to not always be right. And we know as rangatahi Māori, we are often wrong in many places. As a university graduate, even if I was doing well in class compared to my classmates next to me, I was wrong compared to them, because I'm Māori and because of the colour of my skin. And so there's lots of spaces where it's really unsafe to be a young Māori person, to be brown, and our space offers a really safe space for them to come in and actually just be able to be a little bit out there, challenge. I think that's a really important thing too, is that our space allows them to challenge us, to challenge Pakeke. In many situations, especially in Te Ao Māori, we would not talk back to our Pakeke or challenge our kaumātua, but this is a space where I can actually go, oh, Edu, I don't think you're right there. And I think that's really important for our rangatahi to be allowed to come in and do that. So what are they doing in the Academy? So they are working between 30 and 40 hours currently, and then within the next month they will be moving to full-time. Out of the 10, we only have 1 university graduate. The rest of the 9 are all, I think a few of them have been working in like contact centres, a few of them have dropped out of university, and we have 3 of them who are still currently studying. And that was really important in our recruitment process, is that to have a passion and to have a purpose and to have a passion for wanting more for Māori, that doesn't come with a qualification, that doesn't come with a certain level of skills, that comes with being born innately Māori. So in our recruitment process, there was nothing around, could you send in a CV? Because we don't judge our people off a piece of paper. We didn't have an interview because our young people, we know they get nervous in a pale, stale, white environment with 3 adult people grilling them on a question. So we changed it because it didn't suit what we were asking for. If we want people to come in and be creative and come in and test and challenge, We don't need to make them nervous. We don't need to make them feel uncomfortable in their skill set. And so we often said we were creating a band, and the only thing we didn't need is we didn't need 10 drummers. We didn't need 10 people on saxophones. We didn't. I usually say 10 guitarists, and someone will say something about the song and make a joke. So I've started to use other instruments. But we don't need 10 people that are the same. We need people from different backgrounds, different experiences, different life skills. And so that was really important for us to be able to change our recruitment process to suit what we actually needed from people. So what are they doing in the academy? One day a week they are working on personal projects. So they are learning a whole lot of tools, and they can use those tools to look at researching their own personal projects. So we have some of them investigating racism within the justice system, Maori housing and papakainga. We have some looking at te reo revitalisation, financial literacy. So it's really anything that kind of gets them going and they love, and they get to use our tools that we teach them to develop that personal project that they will eventually pitch for us to have in our lab space and for our work and kaimahi to work on. They will be doing a day a week where they learn the basis of our tools through our bachelor's and master's program. So on the side of this, we are partnering with the University of Canterbury to create a bachelor's and a master's of Maori innovation. And I think what's really important with that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, is that it's using titles that are enticing for young Maori people. So I think one of the courses is like Unleashing Mana Motuhake. And as a young Maori woman, I think, man, that's better than Com 101. That's better than Engineering 101 or Finance 101. Unleashing Mana Motuhake, wicked. So they'll be doing a day learning that. They will be doing a day on reflection and developmental evaluation, so recognising that we can learn from our mahi. And then they will also be doing a day on te kurekurenga, our kawa. So it's really important that we continuously immerse them in that, because that is our, I guess, our area of difference, but also what binds us all together. So that is, I guess, a really quick, not really quick, that wasn't a really quick example of what the academy was. But if we jump to the next slide, this is just a really quick rundown, I guess, of the overarching purpose of the academy and the offering and process that we aim to deliver through the academy. So rangatahi come in with a purpose or a passion, and we've got that, but at the same time, we kind of think that if you're born Māori, you're born with a purpose and a passion, but our rangatahi come with that. And we know that that's a spectrum. We've had people coming in with passions around environmental, housing, policy, health, justice, education. Our people are willing to work anywhere and are willing to make difference anywhere because it's all needed. They fill their kite with mātauranga and tools. We teach them so they develop as a young person. We network them. We're looking to bring in a whole lot of external partners, and that's probably a plug to Penny and Barack now that you guys are probably someone we'll get down to come and have a kōrero with them. We give them a platform. So this is a platform that Delane and I have now because we work within Tokona Te Raki. And we have amazing networks that we can call on and reach out to for support. And then the ideal situation is that they can turn their purpose into a profession. So they have an area they're really interested in working, they have all the mātauranga to back them up, they have platform and networks, and now actually you should go and you can work in other organisations and support them with the challenges they face and the ambiguity they sit within, but from a specifically Māori lens. So it's similar to what Delane said, rather than giving organisations Western frameworks to solve their issues and to solve their problems, we will give them a Māori framework with Māori people presenting on that. So that's just a quick, I guess, sum up of what we would hope for the academy. Next. Awesome. So this is just a really good example of how we manage our relationships and partnerships as treaty partners. So that was the academy and kind of what we're doing, and keen for you guys to throw out any partai or comments around that. But it's a really good example of us as treaty partners and bringing together those relationships. So the academy is a partnership between Te Runanga o Ngaitahu and Te Whare Wānanga o Waitaha, or the University of Canterbury, and Tokona Te Raki. So the idea is that the body of the manu, our shared tiriti innovation space, is Tokona Te Raki. So we are the body of the manu, and then tangata whenua and tangata tiriti are the wings. So the idea is that without those wings and without them working together, our manu can't get anywhere. Our mahi at Tokona Te Raki cannot get anywhere unless we have tangata whenua and tangata tiriti working together and coming together in a shared space. And so obviously, I don't know if there's any university people on the call, so I apologise in advance. But we know that universities aren't a space that are usually fluid in their work. You know, you have lectures that you go to on these dates. You work by you learn by sitting in a room, listening to someone talk at you. We know that Maori do not learn well like that, and we learn better in a wānanga space, and we learn better by doing. And so it was really difficult to get the university to go, actually, what is going to benefit our people and what will benefit you in terms of increasing your bicultural competency, increasing your relationship with Maori and mana whenua, is that if you let us teach and learn in a way that benefits us. And so it was really difficult to bring Te Runanga o Ngaitahu and the university together. They've got a really good relationship, but it's hard. It's that saying, everyone wants change until they have to change themselves. And that if we didn't have Tokona Te Raki and our kaua of Te Kore Korenga, it would have been very difficult to convince the university that they needed to change their expectations around how they treat and teach Māori. And we had to convince Te Runanga o Ngaitahu that we should partner with the university. We had an idea that we could do it all on our own, but we can't. We have many Māori that are disconnected from their iwi and they prefer to work in environments like university. We have many Māori groups within the university that might have different darus, and Te Runanga o Ngaitahu has to come in and bring that together and bind that. And so there was difficulties between both parties to try and bring them together. But it is really Te Kore Korenga and what Delane talked about earlier that brings that together. And so we say that, you know, inequity is a global problem. It is absolutely a global problem, and it impacts everyone differently around the world. But in Aotearoa, we have the unique advantage of having Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We have a document that as tangata whenua and tangata tiriti, we have to uphold, and that document holds mana. And even though some people don't think that, I can have a conversation with people that don't think that, but it's really about that we have something that we can go to and we can question the actions and relationships that people have. So we have something that's tangible that we can go back to. So that is our point of difference and an advantage that we have in New Zealand. And what Te Kore Korenga is that it offers structure and discipline and a process to bring people together. So it was really important to be able to bring the university into our space and show them our processes and run them through it and go, actually, we have a tool that you can tangibly touch, that you can reach into, and you can see how we're going to work together, what the outcomes are, what the next steps are. So Te Kore Korenga is our tool that we use to ensure that those treaty partnerships are really cared for. And the academy is just a really good example of how we had to invite them in and really show them that process to get their buy-in. probably the main stuff I have around the treaty partnerships. And so I guess one last thing is that there's lots of people that we need to work with, and there's lots of people we need to convince that there needs to be change. But all of these people are doing great things and good on them, and we commend them for their mahi, but it is coming together and moving in a process together rather than lots of people going off and doing lots of different things. Let's combine that effort, let's combine that energy, and that's the idea of Tokona Te Raki and Te Kore Korenga, is that it's a tool that we can convince people to come together and push their energy and efforts together. So based off my kōrero, and I know there's probably quite a bit to take in, aroha mai, but it is, do you believe your organisation is a good treaty partner? And I know that's very blunt, but I would love to know. And what are you doing to be a good treaty partner, and then how you might improve this. And so, yeah, more than happy to explain that or explain any of the kōrero I just did before we break out, but up to you guys. Anything to add?
Kia ora. Again, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we'll see if we can come back to those, but we'll let you have some time to process this kōrero and this question. Do you believe your organisation is a good treaty partner, and what you are doing to be a good, and what are you doing to be a good treaty partner? So we touched on that in the, the very big first session, and just weaving this kōrero through. It's a big question, so just start where you can start in terms of unpacking or reflecting on what you've heard, and we'll come back in about just over 10 minutes. So it's just time to do a little bit of processing around this partai and how it sits and what we've heard from Madison. And just want to say thank you for that kōrero, Madison. Really powerful, quite spine tingling stuff. So thank you very much for taking the time to share that with us. So Baruch will do the magic thing, and then we'll come back and see each other again in 10 minutes or so. We just want to invite everyone just to take 1 minute and drop a thought or something that just surfaced in the conversation that you've had in the chat. So just take a minute, pause, and just have a think about one thing that stood out from that conversation and drop it in the chat, and we'll just have a little kind of collective conscious of the types of things that people were going to in their conversation. So just a minute, pause, and just drop something in the chat. I can see some powerful reflections going into the comments there, and some more will keep coming. And I know that some of us are sitting in some really complicated places in government around this question. It's really not a simple question to be asking. And people are grappling every day with what this means. I would be interested at some point, maybe we can have a sort of collective reflection on this, but from the kind of spaces and places that we've been in, this question is being grappled with more seriously than we've ever seen it be grappled with before. So even though it's hard, it seems to be much more real and much more present and much more granular than the conversations have been in government in the past. So that in itself is something to be hopeful about, even though it's certainly not an easy answer. And what Tokona Te Raki have shared with us is some of their journey, even just in the last 5 years of negotiating this, and it's fast work and it's slow work. So I just want to acknowledge that this is a big question to be asking, and appreciating that people are reflecting on this in a really genuine and active way in their spaces. And that means different things for different people on this call. What I'm going to do now is hand over to Portia, who's going to talk a little bit about the learning mahi, and that talks right into the space of working together differently is something that we're going to have to learn together differently and try things and build our understanding of what it actually means. And so Portia can share a little bit of how they've conceptualized that from a Ngāi Tahu perspective.
Yeah, okay, cool, awesome. Kia ora koutou. just looking at the time, and so I will keep this section fairly brief, but I really want to invite you all to take a deep breath and enter a sort of a place of stillness and reflection. Once Penny brings up the next slide, I just wanted us to very quickly revisit our Te Kore Korena visual image. Today when we started our prezi, we started in Te Ao. Delane spoke to us about our kawa, about our organisational process and how we kind of operate in this space. Maddie then took us through Te Po, which is our space of imagining the future of creativity. We heard about the rangatahi and some of the wonderful things that they've already done, but also some of the things that are yet to come. So that really is that space of Te Po. It's of those inklings of things to come. We're not quite there yet. We can see it in the horizon. We've got some ideas coming up, but they're yet to be realised. Through this very last part of our session with you, we're entering into Te Kore, and like I said, it's a place to just take a deep breath, sit back and do a little bit of reflection. Delane talked about our Friday sessions, and we kind of organise ourselves so that Friday is our space as a team to do Te Kore together, to spend that time thinking about our mahi from the week, thinking about our contracts, our any kind of tensions that have come up, unresolved things, but also the wins as well, what's happened, what's, been amazing about our work too. But that stuff all happens in the space of Te Kore. And then it is a cyclical process, and then once we are ready to move out of Te Kore, then we enter back into the world of Te Ao Marama again. Today we've covered our priorities with you, which is obviously embedding the kawa. It's a living thing into our organisation and our team, which continues to grow. That growing our cohort of rangatahi future makers is happening right now. We're, like Maddie said, we're right in the second week of it. And our research is kind of in the mix of everything. It's that nexus that supports us to think about those systems changes, because as much as we are working on projects in mahi and whānau transformation, another core aspect of our organisation is actually looking at that larger system that we all live and work in. And one way of doing that is thinking about ourselves within that system, because even as a small team, we have our own little system. So this, our kawa, Te Kore Korena, allows us to think about us as a system, and our research and our kind of insights mahi supports us to think about the wider system. So if we could go to the next slide, Penny. Very briefly, we like to think about ourselves. This is one of Edu's sayings, a think tank and a do tank. And part of that is that, yes, we are busy in our mahi and our projects and our initiatives, but in order for us to, like I just said, have those systemic level shifts or to have ideas emerge about what those might be, we have to carve out space to do that think tank. To do that think tank space, really. And so again, I'm reiterating the same messages here, but for us as an organisation, that was a big shift. We were a project-based organisation that was really busy in the mahi and having some awesome outcomes for whānau, but what we soon realised was that we were coming up against the same issues again and again in the system. So we might be having some fantastic Māori trade training apprenticeships going through, but then they would go into these organisations that were really not responsive to Māori culture, and they would feel isolated, and it was the same issues. Or we'd be working in a polytech and we would have kaimahi or tutors and staff that weren't culturally responsive in their practices. So we consciously made that effort to actually reduce some of the project mahi to carve space to think more carefully about how we could become thought leaders in this, so that we've got the balance between the systems lens thinking and the practice lens doing. So think tank, do tank is kind of how we organise ourselves. Next slide, please. Another way of thinking about te ao, te kore and te pō is about, and the way that we do in our organisations is around insights. So that's our te kore, it's our inspirational insights that come to us through our reflections, but it's also stuff that comes through whānau voice, systems mapping, storytelling, and the time to think and have hui with people that are outside our organisation as well as inside our organisation to bring fresh insights. Innovation is our space of te pō. Like I said, it's that space where creativity happens, but also for us, that's where the cultural mātauranga Maori kaua sits for us. It's really what we see as being pivotal to the way forward. And impact is our te ao, is what we're doing, making a difference in people's lives. Do we know that we're doing the right things? And how can we ensure that some of the research and evaluation that we are doing translates into practice for people? And it's about having not just a seat at the table, but having something to say at the table. And so that impact is just as important as the insights and innovation, but it's the blending of the all three that's an ongoing process for us. So next slide, Penny. I'm sorry, I'm kind of racing through this because I'm really aware of the time. But in this particular image, what I wanted to stress about was that, yes, it's about learning by doing. That's where we're a learning organisation, but really that relationships are at the heart of what we do. We're a kaupapa Māori organisation, and the research that we do here, we all live and work in this community. And for Delane and Mary, they on one of the projects we've just come off the back of as a rangatahi project, they are related to a lot of the participants that took place in the research. So it's something that we hold near and dear to our hearts. It's never an extractive relationship where we kind of flit in and flit out and take the insights and go and share them, but never go back to the community again. Actually, what we do here is about us working with our community for the benefit of the community, but also I think a really important piece about what we're doing and trying to get better at actually is that capability building too, so that we know that whānau have the answers, but how can we support whānau to be a part of that solution making process as well, so that they're not just participants, that they're actually learning skills and knowledge that enable their lives along the way. And I think a mantra that we all kind of work to is that whānau need to be better off having encountered us than and not ever worse off from the experience that they've had with us. So these are some of the kind of deep thinking kind of questions that we ask ourselves about the mahi that we're engaged in, which is, you know, like I said, are our communities and whānau better off from us even engaging with them? And, you know, do we know what actions are needed and by whom to shift conditions? And really what's changing because of what we're doing. So we might think we're doing a wonderful job, but if we don't check ourselves, then, you know, potentially we could be down a rabbit hole that's not actually leading to any better outcomes for anybody that we're working with. So yeah, those are the four aspects again that we work across: so system space, whānau insight space, the evaluative thinking and practice, and then really that piece around the value add. So who's better off from this? Next slide, please. And if we're doing that right, and if we're collecting evidence, then sometimes, say sometimes, that collective body of evidence across the insights, innovation and impact leads to some clear levers for change in terms of shifting narratives, changing relationships, changing practices and changing systems. I mean, ultimately, the work that we're engaged in is around transformation, not transaction. But we know that we need to do a little bit of both in every area. So, yeah, I could say more there. The other thing I really want to just say about this slide is that never underestimate the importance of building that shared vision. It's absolutely essential to what we do. And we've found that time and time again, we have to come back to that vision and just check that, you know, it's a bit like a theory of change, but ensuring that we are working towards a shared vision pretty much sets us up for every other aspect. So, so this is a very fast-tracked corridor through this, but next slide, please. Obviously, loads of learnings at the moment, but one of the big learnings for us is that the process matters, that, you know, having a kawa and having an end-to-end visual process is really important for bringing people along the way, but it's also, like I said, those relationships and the way that we conduct ourselves is just as important as the work that we actually do. For us, as a Te Ao Māori organisation, culture matters. We really believe that Mātauranga Māori is the way of the future in terms of transformational change, and that's why we are backing Te Kōrikōrina 100%. Like I've had the real privilege today of presenting with the rangatahi, they are ready to be in the driver's seat, and I think organisations in general in Aotearoa need to think more strategically around what that rangatahi capability build piece looks like, because yeah, the future is theirs and we need to empower them to be in the driver's seat.
Beautiful kōrero, thank you. Wonderful, wonderful way to end our day. Ngā mihi nui nui, Delaney, Madison and Portia. It was just fantastic to have you share your whakaaro, your mahi with us. Thank you so much. All the messages that you've kind of summed up with there intersect with what we've started to kōrero about and what we'll dig in deeper. So that's just a really fantastic place for us to leave it. Awesome. So just in a really beautifully aligned way, last time we sent you out a little prompt for reflection. We just invite, if you do nothing else, if you have no, you know, I know everyone's bandwidth is absolutely maximized. If there's one thing that you want to just try and take up with the team, and it's what Portia and the folks have really emphasized this morning, is that space to just have a different conversation. Just open up enough oxygen in your week to just check in with each other, and then that can grow a bit more about the why and the what. So we can feel like we can't make massive changes in our organization, certainly not overnight, but one really powerful thing is just to create a pause space, a reflection space where we just check in and think, what are we doing? What does it mean? How does it connect? So if we can invite just that one thing, and then there's other things that you can take up if you've got capacity for. And Portia talked about evidence. There's some tools just to start thinking about how our organizations are doing and working with evidence. We'll pick up on that as we go through what it is that we value and track. And there's also some other things that can help you facilitate conversations with your team to just grow some of the learning that you're sharing here. So we can talk more about that next time we gather. I hope everybody gets a little bit of space over the weekend just for some pause time. Thank you so much for your time and energy. Any feedback, any thoughts, we'd love to hear them. And over the next couple of times, we'll be looking to invite just some input from different teams about how this is connecting into their mahi. So we'll be reaching out and just connecting with how people want to reflect back how this is connecting in and where they're at in their work. So just look out for that, or put your hand up if you're interested to share in that way. So I'll leave it there. People have to go, and just thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Madison, Portia, Delaney, and I'm just going to hand over to Baruch to close, if that's okay, Baruch.
Aye, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. That was another really powerful session. Thank you very much. I'll just close on karakia. Unuhia mai te uru tapunui. Ke watea, ke mama, te ngaka o te tinana, te hinengaro. Ko e rā e rongo, e whakairia ake ki runga. Kia tina,
Teina.
homi e taiki e.
Taiki e.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
Kia ora whānau.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.